You're in a room, you ask for feedback, and no one says a thing. If you find yourself in that spot, that doesn't mean that there isn't anything wrong. It actually means the opposite. There's probably a lot of things wrong, and you haven't built the connection so that people feel safe to express their concerns.
Chad Peterman here, and you are listening to Can't Stop the Growth, a platform for leaders and teams to grow and thrive. We highlight the importance of personal development, pursuing greatness, and always chasing your potential. Let's get into it.
So today we're going to talk the power of connection. So as you'll notice, and as I was going through my notes, a lot of these are very similar, right? Creating connection, figuring out how we can best communicate with our people and get them to perform at their best and support them in doing so. And so Maxwell has a quote that relates to this section. It is, "Leaders touch a heart before they ask for a hand." And we've talked about this. We've emphasized the power of one-on-ones, and this is a lot of where you're going to make those connections. You're also going to make those connections and gain that influence on just your day-to-day interactions. I've talked about this before. When you show up with energy, when you show up looking to make an impact on somebody, you gain influence. Pretty simple, right? No one really wants to probably associate with the person who, is in a bad mood or is grumpy or, is just kind of a pain in the ass. And so if you find yourself in that spot, get out of it because creating connection is all about what are we doing on a daily basis to connect with those around us, whether we directly manage them or we work with them. How do you gain that influence? And all of you can probably think of somebody on our team that may or may not have a certain level of influence. There's those people that, if they say something or they have an idea, you listen. And, okay, how can we make this work? And then there's others where they may not have as much influence. And so that idea, that plan, whatever it may be, gets stopped or gets halted for one reason or another. And so as we think about what leadership means, how do we gain influence, we also need to figure out how do we connect with people. That doesn't mean we need to, want to hang out with everybody after hours and, all of these things. There's a lot of people here that have been here for a long time. We've never had a beer after work. But guess what? We know each other. We like each other. We're connected by where we work, and we're going to help each other do whatever needs to be done. And so when we think about that, how do we create that emotional connection before people follow us? How do we dig in to try to build that trust, that engagement, that loyalty before we start barking at somebody to do this or do that or whatever it may be? I had an example of this, but I'm not going to talk about it today. But there was a certain person on our team that had some new team members here recently. I'm going to be very vague about this, okay? I'll tell you why later. But I saw something, it was actually over the weekend, where this person was reaching out to find out how to create this is really difficult, how to create something for new team members that would create that connection, would show that, hey, we're more than just about, hey, I'm your manager, I'm going to tell you what to do. It was more about making that connection, making them feel welcome, making them, understand that this is more than just me telling you what to do all the time and do this, do that, do this, do that. It was far more. And so for me, that was very like, oh my gosh, like that is perfect for really what we're talking about today. How do we build that connection? And so when you think about those people on your team, how would you rate your connection with them? How would you rate what level of influence you have with them? What does that look like? Do you know their kids' names? Do you know what they like to do for fun? You don't have to like to do that thing. I always bring up the example. Dan, big duck hunter. Me, not going to be duck hunting anytime soon. Okay? I like to be warm. That seems weird. I know it's in the spring and different things like that, but yeah. But I know Dan is a duck hunter, and that's what he does. And, he'll go on his little duck hunts and all of the things. I kind of diminished that. He's not in here. He'll be fine. But, he does his little duck thing, and that's great. Not for me, but I'm interested in it, and I hope he, kills a bunch of ducks or whatever you do with that. It's just all of those things. How do you build that connection? Well, we build that connection by what we talked about, by having one-on-ones, by sitting down with somebody, by asking them how their weekend was, by taking an interest in what they do. Because all of those connections are ultimately what gives us the authority to lead. When we don't have those connections, you are literally just barking out orders to people. And we all know how that goes. It doesn't go great. The other piece of this is understanding, not only connecting with them, but understanding what it is that they need. Everybody on your team needs something different. It's my belief that you have to be a little bit different of a person for everybody on your team. Now, that probably runs counter to what most people think when they get into a leadership role. Most people, when they get into a leadership role, it's, I get to call the shots. I get to call the rules. I get to enforce the rules. Look at me. Well, that's not what it's about. At the end of the day, like we've talked about many a times, being a leader is maybe one of the hardest things because you have to give up complete control. You have to lean in to everyone on your team a little bit differently, depending on what they need, depending on what help they need, where they are, how they learn, how they communicate. I've always been we've done the disc forever and a day around here. And it was so often that people celebrated where they were, right? I'm a strong D, watch out. Like that was like their thing, right? Like, yeah, this is me. Or I'm an I like to have a great time, everybody watch out. But at the end of the day, as a leader, it's important to understand who you are, but then understand that you have to lean into everybody else's personality. Because what is it? The I ain't too fond of the D, right? The S and the C, they have some issues. Well, that's the way it goes, yeah. So if I know where I am on the little circle, and I know where everybody else is on my team, how do I lean in to what it is that they want to do? How do I lean in to how they communicate, to how they learn? All of these things are extremely important. It's when we don't take into consideration how others, those that we're leading, interpret the world, think about things. That's when connection breaks down. Because then you have two forces fighting against one another, trying to prove who is right. Well, no, we should have fun all the time. Well, no, we should just do it and just follow the bulleted list of things that we need to do, and it should be really easy, and all of that's great. But we have to work together. We've got to create that connection. And so when we think about that, what are we doing to build those connections, to build those relationships so that leading ultimately becomes easier? Leadership is hard when we want to fight against this connection. But we just have a job to do. Just do it. Just do the job. Figure it out. Go for it. How do we build those connections? I think about our, what was it? Just a few months ago, we had most of our service line managers working out of a gingerbread house. Many of you that know me probably know that I ain't working out of a gingerbread house. Probably not building a gingerbread house. But you know what? That damn gingerbread house brought so much freaking joy to everybody in this building because that's who they are. Eric and Aaron are two of the biggest. They are always having a good time. And you know what? It shows. You watch that department. If you ever get a chance, go into an HVAC departmental meeting, and it is unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. I've been going to department meetings for 14 years. But again, that's how they make connection. And it would have been wrong for me as a leader to say, tear down the damn gingerbread house. Honestly, the funniest thing was people that were like literally playing into it and down on a knee talking to another person, human, adult, through a makeshift window in a cardboard gingerbread house. One of the funniest things I've ever seen. But there again, that wouldn't have been me, but there again, everybody's a little bit different. And that's what makes us who we are. Everybody's a little bit different. If everybody operated like me, it would be the most boring company to ever work for. Because that's who I am. I am fairly just, this is what I do every single day. Routine is boring to some people. I get that. My wife reminds me of it all the time. But I like to do what I like to do. So that's me. But I know that not everybody operates like that. Actually, very few people operate like that, I've found. But that's okay. Because it's my job as a leader to connect with everybody. And everybody operates a little bit differently. And so when we think about it, connection comes in a myriad of different kind of lenses, right? Like there's the connection of like, seeing someone on, for who they are, how they communicate, what they're interested in, what type of personality they have. But then there's also the connection of making sure that they're heard. Not talking at them, but trying to understand what their concerns are. Because we build connection when we actually let people express their concerns. That doesn't mean that the concern is right or wrong. It's just a concern, and we need to listen to that. So when you think about your team, what are you doing to create a platform for them to address their concerns? To address things that they may think need to be fixed or could be better or they just don't understand. So often, especially in this business, it's emergency service, right? When it's rolling, we're running. We're running. So it's easy to forget to take a step back and say, hey, let's look at what we're doing here. What kind of thoughts do you guys have? Give me your feedback. And what's the one thing that we hear in this industry so often? You're in a room, you ask for feedback, and no one says a thing. If you find yourself in that spot, that doesn't mean that there isn't anything wrong. It actually means the opposite. There's probably a lot of things wrong, and you haven't built the connection so that people feel safe to express their concerns. Think about that. How often have you asked, okay, does anybody have any questions? No questions. But then when they leave, they've got all the questions, right? They've got all the questions. This happened in this very room when we rolled out our new pay plan for our installers. I asked, does anybody have any questions? No one had any questions. Then they all went out in the hallway and had all the questions. So I didn't do a good job there. I didn't do a good job of breaking down the barriers so that they felt comfortable asking the questions that they all had, right? And that's on me. And I probably have a tendency to do that quite a bit of time. Now that I'm actually talking about this, I'm like, ooh, this is something I really need to work on here. But again, how do you break down those walls? Because when we break them down, we create connection. Where people feel safe, where people feel like they can express their opinion, where people want to help build as opposed to just sit there and be told. How do we create that? This whole connection thing is not easy, right? I'm trying, I ask the people how they're doing. I talk to them. I do all of these things, but like, how do I build connection? Well, what I will tell you, much like any of you that are married or have a significant other, it takes time, right? You and your significant other weren't the best of friends the first time you met. And so with leadership, the one thing that can be frustrating is we don't see instant results, right? It's not like, well, I'm trying to be a good leader. Don't they just started, don't they know I'm a good leader? Like, just follow along, do your thing. And it also gets increasingly more difficult because everybody's a little bit different. Well, I keep doing this thing and Sally isn't really buying in. Well, then let's sit down with Sally and find out how we can get her to buy in. One of my favorite things and I've heard it more and more over the last probably couple of months, is we had a breakthrough with this person. We had a breakthrough. Well, to me, when we have a breakthrough, what ultimately that means is we had someone who we would have otherwise just kicked to the curb. They don't want to do it. They don't want to figure it out. But we kept pushing, and we kept pushing, and we kept pushing. I heard a manager say the other day, I couldn't get through this guy. I've had 2 one-on-ones with him this week. Awesome. Because I'm going to get through to him. We're going to figure this out. And that is the type of resilience you need when it comes to building connection. It isn't easy. If it was, everybody would do it. But so many are afraid of taking the time to make that connection. Taking the time to sit down with someone and say, hey, something's off here. How can I help you? Where do we want to go? And it's not always about sitting down with somebody. We've talked about this before. Sitting down with somebody to only try to prove to them how smart you are. Well, just want to tell you, according to the handbook, which I know and have a copy of right here, you are wrong. Okay, probably not the best way to build a connection. And at the end of the day, if they're violating something in the handbook, who's that on? It may be their responsibility to show up on time for work. But have you sat down and figured out why they couldn't show up on time for work? Did they feel safe telling you that they had to drop their kids off and they couldn't make it on time? How many times have we found that out? Hey, man, you can't show up. Yeah, man, I got to drop my kids off. Okay, well, do we just want to move your start time back? Because obviously you can't not drop the kids off. We can't have them riding around on your first call, all right? So let's figure this out. And that's just a small example, but think about all the times when someone on your team didn't do what they were supposed to, or wasn't able to complete the task as you had instructed. How did you address that problem? Had you built a connection deep enough so that conversation went really well? And if you didn't, what an opportune time to build a connection. More than likely, they know that they did it wrong. So rather than go into the conversation attempting to prove how smart you are and how dumb they were for not doing it right, what if you went in attempting to build a connection? What if you went in with the mindset to serve them? Hey, I know this didn't go the way that we had planned. Obviously, we both know that. We don't need to harp on it. However, how can I help you do this right the next time? What do you need from me? Do you need me to sit right here and do it with you? Do you need me to get you some training? Whatever it is. And all situations are different, but what is it that I can do to help you? How strong of a connection do you think that'll build? We talked about this in the very first one of these that we did. The people on your team need to know that you want their success as much And in some cases, maybe more than they even want it for themselves. Because what do you think people are going to do if they know that you want it as bad as they want it for themselves? And that's how we build connections. We build connections by how we approach these conversations, by how we approach our job as a leader. Your job as a leader is not based on what your title is. You are in a leadership position. You are on this call because you made the choice to put others before yourself. And I commend you for that. But what I'm here to tell you is it ain't easy. We are wired as humans to think about ourselves. And in a lot of instances, that's good, right? Breathe, operate, all that good stuff. Yes, we need to be selfish sometimes. But that's why leadership is such a special, special thing. Because it goes against how we are wired as humans. And we got to fight it. Most of the things in life that are good for us go against how we are wired as humans. Seek comfort, not discomfort. Think about ourselves, not others. Think about it. Everything that we do. So rather than try to fight against reality, embrace it. How do you prepare for a conversation that you're going to go into? Do you sit down and figure out, hey, this person's really struggling. I'm going to go into this conversation, and I need to figure out how I'm going to help them. I need to figure out how I'm going to have a breakthrough with this person because I know that they can be successful. I know that they can do this. And I'm going to give every ounce of everything that I have to help them. And at the end of the day, you may find that they don't want it. And that's okay. But we're not going to not try. We're not going to give up on building those connections. Because with every person that you lead is an opportunity for you to become a better leader. We're always working at this. We're always striving to become better leaders. And it's through the connections that we build. It's through the people that we are able to build influence with. Maxwell has a quote, "People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." Pretty much sums it up, right? How much do you care about the people on your team? And how do you show them? Are you willing to raise your level of care for the people on your team? And more importantly, are you willing to show them? That's what it's about. Show them that you care by how you approach every interaction you have with them. Show them you care with the level of energy that you bring to your job so that hopefully it rubs off a little bit on them. At the end of the day, it's hard to do, but it's pretty simple, right? Pretty simple. It's just we get caught in the world. And at the end of the day, we just need to focus on how do I make really good connections today? How do I really, really work to make sure that the people on my team know that I have their success at the forefront of my focus? Go do that, and you will build one hell of a team. Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to connect with me personally, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel and consider joining the CSTG Arena. As always, keep growing out there.